Welcome back. It's time for us to actually implement continuous integration into our project. We're going to be using CircleCI, and we're going to learn a few tricks along the way. And we're going to set this up all ourselves. So let's get started. Now, we're going to be using CircleCI, which manages the server for us. So they own the servers, and we simply are using their service to run some tests for our project. Now, CircleCI is actually free for a simple project like ours, so you're more than welcome to follow along and implement CircleCI into your projects. If you're ever working on anything in teams, I do recommend that you use them because they're just very nice and simple to use. And all we need to do is click on Explore the Docs, and just a heads up that they recently upgraded to a 2.0 version that uses Docker containers. So just a heads up that for your documentation, we want to make sure we use the latest. A lot has changed since the 1.0 release. All right, let's talk about some of the things that we'll be doing. Well, we have our RoboFriends app, remember them? And well, this simple app still works, everything is good, but Bruno has asked us to implement continuous integration into this project. Now, using this repository, we're going to try and include CircleCI on here. So every time there's a new pull request, CircleCI will run through everything and make sure that it's even ready to be merged. So let's get started with CircleCI so that we can implement it into our project. Now, CircleCI uses a YAML file, something that we have seen before with Docker as well as when we worked with AWS Lambda. And it uses a YAML file to identify how you want your testing environment set up and what tests you want to run. So let's build that first. The first thing we want to do is we want to create a new folder in the root of our project. And by default, we have to name it CircleCI with a dot in front of it. And that's because on any machine, such as Mac, Linux, or Windows, files or folder whose names have a dot in front of it are called system files, and they're automatically hidden by default users. But this is a standard that CircleCI requires to have for their 2.0 version. In here, we create a new file. And this file will have to be called config.yaml file. And this is where we will configure what we want CircleCI servers to run for us. To get things started, let's just do a simple YAML file that CircleCI can run. And just a heads up, in case you're wondering where you can find more information, well, obviously, if you scroll down, they have great documentation of what you can do. Let's just copy and paste some of their examples here and paste it into our config.yaml file. We see that we're defining our version. In our case, we're using CircleCI 2, so we need version 2. And then we define jobs, what we want the server that they have to do. Well, we want it to do a build, and this build will have a Docker image. Remember, I said version 2 of CircleCI uses Docker, and we know all about that because we learned about it in our Docker section. What CircleCI is doing is it's creating an image where it can run our test. And we can see here that they're using Docker Hub, and they have a custom image called CircleCI, and it looks like they're using Ruby as the container to run our tests. Now, this doesn't have to be Node or anything JavaScript specific. This is just the environment that the test will be running in. And you can see that that is their custom image. So CircleCI is going to use this container to create the environment for your tests. And then we have steps of what we need to do. And we see over here that run simply says to echo a first hello. And that is just to print out a first hello to our project. Now, for us to implement CircleCI, we need to go to sign up. And in here, you simply have to click sign up with GitHub. And once you do that, you'll be able to connect to your GitHub dashboard. And you see over here that I already have some past projects already running. And these are all my continuous integration steps. But for now, if this is your first time, you might have to give access to Circle CI from your GitHub account. Otherwise, you should see an empty builds dashboard. The next thing we want to do is actually add a project. We want to make sure we add our RoboFriends testing repo so that Circle CI knows about it. I'm going to click Add Projects. And in here, oh, look at that, I have all my repos listed here. I'm going to click on RoboFriends Testing, Set Up Project. You see that in here, we get some default things that we should be using, or we can change things. For example, our project, we can have different operating systems. We can use different languages. I recommend that you just leave the default ons. Our project is Node, and we can just have a Linux operating system. And then it shows you what the next steps are going to be. But we're going to ignore all of that and leave everything as it is now. You can see over here that they even give you a sample file that you can use. They make it very, very easy to get started. I'm just going to click Start Building. And you see right away that my RoboFriends app starts building. Everything is all set up. And now the container, you can see Start Container, is going to run through some commands automatically. So this is running on their servers on my RoboFriends testing repo. All right, I had to pause the video there because it does take a bit of time for Circle CI to actually run everything. You can see that it took about 5 minutes to get everything done, but let's take a look at what it just did. We actually haven't even given it the config.yaml file because remember, this is just on my desktop and I haven't committed it to GitHub yet. If we go back, we see that there's a few things that happen with Circle CI without even giving it the YAML file for configuration. We see that we're able to set up the environment. It used the Circle CI Ruby 2.4.1 image that we saw to launch an environment for us. We can see over here in Start Container all the things that it did. It also has enabled SSH. As you remember from the SSH section, we can now use SSH, look over here, to actually SSH into this container and see how everything's going. Maybe we need to debug something, we can SSH in. Again, something that we'll have to actually add our public key to the container if we want to do that, and that's a little advanced and you can read up on your own, but that option exists, which is nice. And then we do something called checking out the code, which is Circle CI checks out your GitHub repository and clones it. You can see over here, clones the full repository and actually runs through some steps by default. It runs npm install. It runs npm test. If we click over here, we see that our tests that we have on our project, our RoboFriends project, there are 16 tests, 5 snapshots, all of them passed. And we keep scrolling down and everything finishes completely. We have green everywhere and it says success. If I go back to the builds, we see that our RoboFriends testing at master is now passing with success. Now let's actually add a bit more functionality than the default functionality we get, which is just running npm install and npm test. Just to spice things up, let's extend this a little bit. Right now we see that we're going to do a build and create a Docker container. We're going to check out the code and run echo a first hello. This is just going to print this text. But Circle CI has this idea of workflows. So I can actually add another step or perhaps another build. So that is another container. And in this container, again, I can just keep everything the same, but this one I'm going to say double trouble to be run. We actually now need to rename these, and this is what workflows is in Circle CI, so that we can distinguish them. So let's just say this one's going to be Bobby, this one's going to be Sally. And now using these two, I can define what we call a workflow or workflows. And in here, we simply say, again, what version we want to use the workflow for. And we can name it whatever we want. I'm going to name it Bobby _ Sally because we're going to be running both of them. And these will have jobs that they would need to accomplish. And these jobs are going to be the Bobby job. Make sure I add a space here. And Sally. So this workflow is going to say, hey, run this workflow, Bobby and Sally, and those include these things. So run 2 containers, running the checkout, and then run echo command. Let's just save this to make sure everything works. We have our Circle CI config.yaml file. Let's actually add this to GitHub so that Circle CI has a configure file to actually play with. I'm going to git add and then git commit. I'm going to add Circle CI to our commit message. And then finally git push origin master. Now I'm using master and I haven't created a branch or forked this project, which is not advised, but for demonstration purposes, for now, I trust myself. It's just me on this project. I'm just going to push straight to master. All right, let's go back to GitHub. Oh, we have 4 seconds ago something that already failed. All right, let's go back to GitHub and see what happens. I'm going to refresh, go to commits, and I see that I have a giant X now next to my commit. If I click on it, all right, we've committed our config.yaml file, and I go back here and I click on the failed. I see that, your config has errors and may not run correctly. Awesome. So, I mean, that's not great, but at least we know that Circle CI can detect our configuration file. And we see here that it gives a pretty nice error of what might have failed. Error migrating config to version 2.0. And the errors occurred in job, workflows, steps is not a list. So let's go back and fix that. With a YAML file, you really have to be careful with indentation. So anytime you're working with YAML files, make sure you follow the documentation and what they expect. In this case, our indentation needs to be 1 back, like this. Let's save that. Once again, do our git push origin master. Although, you know what? Just to demonstrate what Circle CI actually does, let's create a new branch. I'm going to say git checkout B for shorthand to create a new branch, and I'm going to call it Circle CI. All right, we've created a new branch. If I do git status, I see that we have our config YAML file that's been updated. I'm going to say git commit. I'm going to commit Circle CI 2. This is our try 2. And then I'm going to git push origin Circle CI. So push to our branch. Oh, and silly me, I realized that I forgot to git add. Let's try that again. Git add, git commit, Circle CI 2. There you go, that's a lot better. And then we'll run git push origin Circle CI. All right, let's go check out GitHub here. All right, we have a pull request. Let's take a look at here. All right, everything looks good. Those are the changes that I want. I'm going to just, without commenting, just say create pull request. And look at that. Circle CI is now running all my pull requests, just like that. We see that your test passed on Sally, but Bobby right now is still working, so it's half done. How easy was that? And once all the checks have passed, I get these green check marks, and now it's ready to merge pull requests. Let's go check out Circle CI here. I'm going to go back to builds. And we see that, oh yeah, look at that. We have a success. We've spun up the environment. We've checked out the code. That's great. And we also have the echo, double trouble. If we go back here, we see that we did double trouble here with the echo, but what about a first hello by Bobby? If we go back, we actually see that there were 2 jobs. If I go to click on Bobby Sally workflow, we see that, oh, there's 2 jobs in this workflow. If I click on Bobby, I get Bobby, echo, hello first. Okay, that's great. And then if I go back to workflow, I see that, okay, Sally and Bobby, and I see exactly what time it took. If I go back to builds, I see that that's why I have 2 greens here. They each ran in their own container. Very, very cool. And you also notice that we no longer ran the npm test or npm install because we now are giving it a config file. And this config file is going to say exactly what we want it to do. So now we actually have to implement our own to make sure that we test our code, we npm install our code, and everything is running smoothly. All right, I think it's time for us to actually implement something valuable here. Just echoing double trouble doesn't really help us with our RoboFriends app. But now that we see the power of Circle CI, in the next video, we're going to configure this so it has a nice workflow. I'm going to merge the pull request, confirm the merge, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.